Hello and welcome back to another edition of the Markets in 3 Charts. So for this February 2022 edition, we found what we believe are some interesting environmental, economic and share price charts, which as usual, we intend to present to show some of our investment ideas. And this month we're going to be discussing the links in our estimation between rainfall patterns, agriculture and farmland banking. And please note, as always, we're presenting general insights into our decision making and not investment advice. So, our first charts today, we have rainfall decile ranges over the past decade in Australia and the effects of climate on farm profits. So, as we know, has very variable rainfall with low average annual rainfall over most of the continent and intense seasonal falls in the tropics. The rainfall pattern, as we can see on the chart on the left, is generally concentric around the extensive arid core of the continent, which in the west and along parts of the Great Australian Bight even extends to the coast. But around this arid center, there's a broken margin of more humid conditions, which increases the level of precipitation as it nears the coast. And that's particularly so in the east of the continent. But in contrast to this La Nina weather pattern we're experiencing this year and last, the past few decades have actually seen the southern half of the country experience lower than average rainfalls, and especially during the winter periods. And you can see that in this chart on the left with the kind of reddish brown showing that we're having the lowest on record rainfall decile. So we can see in chart 2 on the right the areas of Australia with this below average rainfall that we've just seen have also suffered from below average farm profits, and that's between 2000 and 2019. So the Australian Bureau of Agricultural and Resource Economics research found that when you control for non-climate factors, since 2000, the average annual broad acre farm profits have actually reduced by 22%. And these effects have been most pronounced in the cropping sector, where average profits have reduced by even 35%. And as we know, the forecasts of changing climate towards more extreme weather events are problematic, and they mean that the country's sort of Goldilocks locales with long-term stable rainfall and relatively stable temperatures are becoming increasingly essential for agriculture and increasingly sought after. And that takes us to our next set of charts, and that is the prices of farmland in Adelaide and the Fleurieu region and the rainfall analysis of this same region. So to start off with, despite the fact that this global despite the global pandemic, I should say, Australian rural land prices have actually showed resilience to the economic shock and to associated supply chains. And this has been fueled by a mixture of historically low interest rates and really loose credit, but also surging commodity prices and agricultural product prices. And one marker, though, of exceptional transactions was the value of historical rainfall for the associated properties. And as we saw on the prior page's chart, South Australia has so far been less harshly affected by extreme drought as a percentage of total agricultural land in the country. And it's no coincidence that over the past year, the median price per hectare for farmland in the Adelaide and Fleurieu region increased by 23% to about $14,500 a hectare. And that's a boost from already a very high long-term trend of over 7% per annum over the last 20 years. And you can see that in this first chart here. And at a municipality level, Kangaroo Island, which is within that Adelaide and Fleurieu region, saw a 77% increase in median price per hectare sales. And this can largely be credited to a reduction in transaction volume of 17%. But another factor that has really kept Kangaroo Island agricultural land prices buoyant is the quality of land available there and the fact that it has historically above average levels of rainfall. And you can see that in chart 2, which is the rainfall levels in the Adelaide and Fleurieu region. And Kangaroo Island is the big island. It's actually the third biggest in Australia. And it's a big island just on the left-hand side of that map. And you can see the inset here where there's above average levels of rainfall each year. And also crucially, rainfall reliability for the past 30 years on the island show that winter rainfall has been reliable across this whole region, and there's generally less variability. And winter rainfall has also been about seasonal difference of about 70 millimeters from one year to the next, which is not an enormous amount. And this contrasts to the trend that we saw in the first charts of less winter rainfall across most of southeastern and southwestern Australia. And it makes, of course, land on Kangaroo Island more sought after as well. So this brings us to our final chart, and that is the share price of Kyland, formerly Kangaroo Island Plantation Timbers, over the last 10 years, with some markers of important events from our perspective. So the H&G High Conviction Fund has 8% of its portfolio invested in Kyland shares, and we've held these shares for over a decade at an average cost base of 61 cents a share. So what does Kyland do? Well, it owns just over 18,500 hectares of land on Kangaroo Island, and it's in the process of reverting this land from forestry to agriculture. And the company, which actually was formerly named Rural Oz before it then became Kangaroo Island Plantation Timbers and then Kyland, has the biggest holding of timberland on the island. And these trees were originally planted as part of tax incentivized managed investment schemes over 20 years ago. But without a port from which to ship harvested trees to major markets in, say, Japan and China, forestry on the island was just untenable. And despite a really concerted effort by the company in 2016 to 20 to become the major timberland owner on the island and then construct a port, the South Australian government refused to grant development approval. And then with 90% of Kyland's trees fire affected by the devastating 2019 to 20 bushfires, the company's board and management, which changed in October of last year, decided that the most economic outcome was to revert the timberland into farmland. And as you can see in this share price chart, that has been fairly well received by the market, those changes. And what attracts us to Kyland is we see further upside from here. And the reason for that is that Kyland's current market capitalization is $60 million. And that's compared to its stated net tangible asset backing of $75 million. And these assets on its balance sheet comprise $17 million in cash, $10 million in receivables, and $52 million in land. And that land is valued independently in June 2021, accounting for remediation costs. So the stock is currently trading, consequently, at a 20% discount to the stated net asset value. And we believe there's significant upside to the land valuations, which are on the books at 52 million. And the reason for that is because of the increasing demand that we've just spoken about for high rainfall agricultural land in Australia. And making matters even more favorable for Kyland is the majority of its land holding on the island is on the western side of Kangaroo Island, which, as we saw in the previous charts, had more rainfall than the rest of the island. Now, what does the future hold for Kyland? So in January 2022, the company announced it had appointed AAG Investment Management as the property manager of its estate. Now, AAG had actually made a takeover bid for Kyland's assets in May 2021, which was rejected by the board at that time. And AAG is now responsible for first removing the trees and stumps from the timberland of Kyland's assets, and then preparing the land for agricultural activities. Carland will then be in a position, to make a decision over the best use of this reverted farmland. And we believe that a land holding of its size in high rainfall area would be unique in Australia and would be a really attractive asset for a global pension fund looking to park money, say, for the long term in a really safe jurisdiction. But it also has value as an agricultural ongoing activity if the company decided to do that. So we look forward to keeping our unit holders updated with what happens to Thailand. And on that note, I will thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next month.